two great CNN reporters, CNN's Phil Mattingly, the chief domestic correspondent, and Kayla Tausche, CNN's senior White House correspondent. Good morning. Good to see you guys. So just on the convention first, I mean, because typically, as we know, conventions are incredibly partisan affairs, to say the very least. Now this happens. How does that impact the messaging, the Republican messaging on this? Do they tamp it down? Do they get right back into it? How do they navigate this?
The reason I'm pausing is because I'm thinking about what David Chalian just said about, how's this going to affect the politics of the campaign, and the humility that David just reflected there of we don't know, I think is an important moment that everybody should kind of take some time to consider here. We have no idea how this is going to play out over the course of the next 3 or 4 months. One thing I do think we can be sure of, and I know this, I was talking to some folks who are speaking at the convention, and everyone I spoke to who is planning to note this or make a point of what happened and what transpired over the course of the last 24 hours in their remarks. One person told me they should put the photos by AP's Evan Vucci, Anna Moneymaker, Doug Mills, photographers we all know quite well from the White House press corps, just put them on a loop throughout the convention. And the reason why is because, yes, they have a defiant view right now of this moment in time, but they also think that it shows such a critical component of Donald Trump's campaign, which is strength, the contrast of what they view as strength versus weakness of the current administration, what they view as a president who consistently shows strength against a president that they don't believe does. And so that will be a key component of all this. I think the idea that this is going to be some moment where the country comes together and unifies, to David's point, that seems to be undercut by the politics we've all been through over the course of the last 7, 8, 9 years. I think the real question right now, coming out of this moment as everybody tries to get their heads around it, is, does this escalate? Does this get into even more dangerous territory than it already has, to the extent that's possible? Or can folks figure out a way to wrangle a message that makes the points that they want to make and doesn't allow it to kind of continue to devolve down a path that I think everybody, regardless of your political views, is very unsettled by in this moment?
Absolutely. And look, as you guys were saying, and as everyone's saying before, this could be a moment for unity, I think Trump himself has said that this could unify the nation. But these conventions are not necessarily meant to unify. They're meant to
unify the party.
Yeah, they unify the party. They don't necessarily
against everybody else.
Exactly. So that's going to be it's something that they'll have to straddle this week.
They will have to straddle that. And if Democrats thought that the chaos going on within their own party would potentially divert some eyeballs away from the Republican convention, then this absolutely changed that calculus. I think that is very safe to say. But you also have to look to history about how this is going to impact the candidate, too, because the last time that something like this happened was 1981. President Ronald Reagan, and his approval rating skyrocketed in the wake of that, and his grace under fire, which, to your point, it really depends on how Trump reacts to this and channels this into his message in the next few days. Already, there are many Republicans suggesting that this is essentially the linchpin for his victory. Dan Crenshaw, the congressman from Texas, tweeting last night, just mere moments after that Evan Vucci photo came out, Donald Trump's chances of losing just went to 0. And there were several high-profile endorsements that came out right after the fact. Bill Ackman, who's an influential money manager in New York circles, longtime Democrat, came out on X and said that he was supporting Trump, laid out a very lengthy manifesto as to why. And then Elon Musk said, I fully endorse Donald Trump, and I'm wishing him a speedy recovery. So there are many influential figures in media, politics, donor circles who are suggesting that this perhaps is the beginning of the rise toward the end for Donald Trump, and they want to be on that train with him.
And this is what Congressman Derek Van Orden told Politico about the impact that he believes will happen in November. He's, of course, a Republican from Wisconsin. He said Trump just won the election. He said congressional Republicans already believed Donald Trump was headed back to the White House. Some of them think the Saturday night rally has made that path even easier. That's according to the Politico report. What's your reaction to that?
I think in the moment, you could probably see where he's coming from on that. I think, again, not to constantly caveat everything, we have no idea
what's going to
happen over the course of the next
people may view and go back to their
months.
camps.
We have no idea. And I think there's a responsibility that's incumbent on Trump and the Trump campaign for how they play this and how their messaging kind of proceeds in the wake of this, whether or not they're able to take advantage of it and get, again, this is never about the people who were always going to vote for Donald Trump. This is never about the people who are always going to vote either against Trump or for President Biden. This is about those people in the middle. It's a very small slice of the population, of the electorate, but where they decide to go, how this influences them. And I don't think you can take one night in one moment to define what that's going to be. It's going to be how the campaigns play this out going forward. But what you saw from the congressman there is something, and what you saw from Congressman Crenshaw is something I heard a lot from Republicans last night, of this locks it in. This solidifies it. And maybe that's true. I just don't think we can say definitively at this moment.
Yeah, I mean, you covered the Biden campaign. We're talking a little bit more about how Biden handled it in the next segment, but how do they, I mean, obviously it's hard to gauge the politics of something so serious, and tragic, a shooting and the like, but look, we're in the middle of a presidential campaign. Republican convention's about to take off, and we're inside politics, so we talk about the political fallout. What are you hearing from the Biden campaign?
Well, certainly the president's own ethos, the reason why he ran in 2020 was to be a unifier. He truly believed then, and he truly believes now, that he is the only one who can unite the country in this moment of political fraudness. And so when that happened, there was no question that he was going to address it in some way, to take the high road and to deliver the written statement and then the statement on camera that he did. And the question now is, what does this look like for the Biden campaign, and how do they distill this into where President Biden can continue to have those moments, wishing his predecessor and his now opponent well, while also trying to reestablish and deepen the contrast between the two of them. You know, it's going to be very difficult for him to strike that balance.
Yeah, and look, you already heard, even as they're all this talk about unity and tamping down the rhetoric and stuff, not so much in some of the quarters, some allies pretty close to Trump, including potentially his vice presidential pick, which we could know maybe today, maybe tomorrow, we'll see, maybe earlier in the week. We don't exactly know when Donald Trump will announce his vice presidential pick, but it could be imminent. J.D. Vance is on the top of that list, the Ohio Republican senator. He tweeted in the immediate aftermath of the shooting, "Today is not just some isolated incident. The central premise of the Biden campaign is that President Donald Trump is an authoritarian fascist who must be stopped at all costs." That rhetoric led directly to President Trump's attempted assassination. Now, again, we don't know the motivation of this suspect. They're still investigating that. That is a key aspect of it here. But you're already hearing some Trump allies seizing on this and trying to turn it into something as a wedge issue of sorts, including someone who could be the number 2 on the ticket.
Yeah, which I think is something you should know when you listen or read what he's actually saying here. There's a couple audiences that perhaps Senator Vance is looking towards. I think there's two pieces of this. The first piece is, look, Republicans are really angry, and that should be like an obvious statement, of course, in this moment in time. But the number of people I heard from last night, people who aren't like diehard Trump supporters, who are just have had a visceral response to this, and their belief that this was driven by things that have occurred that Democrats have said or Democrats have acted upon over the course of the last year. It's very real, whether or not you believe the evidence behind it. The other thing I would say here is, look, every speech that Donald Trump gives, he talks about if Joe Biden wins, the country dies. If Joe Biden wins, everything is over, the Constitution falls apart. So, like, let's be real here. This isn't because Joe Biden says Donald Trump is an existential threat. Both sides are saying the exact same thing here. So let's be a little self-aware about what we're talking about here. But Republicans are mad. That's absolutely true. And I think this goes to the point we've been talking about here, which is how people react going forward to this, what their message is, and how they're able to push forward on that message. It's not a sure thing one way or the other. There are a lot of decisions that need to be made by campaigns, by messages, but also by surrogates about how they treat this, because this is a very, very unsettling moment for the country and in history, and a lot's going to play out in the months ahead.
And we were just talking about the two groups of voters that the Trump campaign is going to need to speak with right now. There's on one hand the base, which certainly the message that was in J.D. Vance's tweet would seem directly aimed at that base. But the independent voters, the would-be Haley voters, the undecideds, the 500,000 people in swing states who are still on the fence about who they're going to vote for, they don't necessarily want to see the temperature being taken up on this. They want the temperature to be taken down. And so that's the challenge for both camps.
Okay, so all right, we'll see how they play it out. We're going to discuss more next. Coming up, the assassination attempt against Trump upends the election for both party candidates. More on that next.